Welcome to this year's talk on the next layer of reality. I've been doing these a couple of years at Aaron Swartz Day. I'm pretty sure 2018 was my first year. So this year I want to do an update on motion and physical movement with a non-physical body. So first, a little bit about me. I'm Ryan Sternlicht. Lisa introduced me earlier. I am San Francisco based. Sadly, I can't be there right now, but I do a lot of different things with different nonprofits, including stuff with Lisa, stuff with Internet Archive, Neurotech X San Francisco, Noisebridge Hackerspace, and another number of other groups. I also currently work at Alamo Draft House, which is a theater in San Francisco, and often volunteer at New People Cinema, which is another theater in SF. So this is just a quick breakdown of the different sections in this talk. So there's a quick general update of some of the new information: movement, avatar movement, human to avatar movement capture methods, avatar to human feedback, the next level of those methods, issues, why this matters, and then a little conclusion. So quick general VR update. Over the past couple months, the Pico 4 VR headset was released. It's been getting a lot of pretty good reviews. And then the Quest Pro also released a little while back, which is Meta's new headset that is mainly focused on workspace and augmented or mixed reality pass-through utilization. Then in the really expensive and more upcoming side of things, we have a few major pre-orders of different devices that are now available over the next year or so. One at the Galea VR EG biosensor headset that is a collaboration between OpenBCI and now Varjo. Originally, they were partnered with Valve, which I'm not sure what the state of that partnership is, but they're releasing it next year, 25 grand. Haptics pre-orders finally started recently, so it's expensive, $500 a month and $5,500 per pair of gloves. OOSuit is just released pre-orders 3 days ago, and Tesla Suit Glove pre-orders just released somewhat recently as well. I'll talk about the last three of those a bit more in a few slides. So first off, human movement. Most people understand how to move their own bodies pretty well, and a lot of people want to be able to do that in virtual environments as well. Right now, most VR headsets have controllers that you can have, or a few headsets allow for hand tracking using either cameras on the device or other methods of capture, like a leap motion. You can use, I'll get more into that stuff, but really the whole state of this stuff is translating more of a human's perceived movement or not perceived, getting more of their movement into VR in such a way that it can be perceived by other users in VR. And the big part of this has to do with avatar movement in the virtual world, which translating your movement to your avatar, that's where this gets a lot more complicated because you want it to be accurate. And that can be very difficult to do, especially for lower costs. Like, I'm going to go from devices that cost a few $100 up to theoretical setups that I'd currently estimate in the 50 to $100,000 range once it's able to be produced at scale. Like, one-offs of some of these setups are expensive as all heck. I'll get into those ones later. But to start, we need to talk about capturing the movement of our bodies. Our bodies are very mobile, and there is a lot of information to capture. There's, we have, if you have taken a basic anatomy class, you understand how many parts of our body move. It's a lot, and they all move together, and they interact in very specific ways that we can simulate quite well now. But getting accurate matched movements is pretty difficult still. So the starting point for a lot of things these days is IMUs, inertial measurement units. These are in your phone. Usually they're in a lot of smart devices. They are usually 6 or 9 degree of freedom tracking devices of a accelerometer, a gyroscope, and a magnetometer. And they're really, really accurate, but they have a big drawback, which is the magnetometer and can often drift, especially near metallic objects. And if you don't constantly recalibrate to a known item, the gyroscope and accelerometers can also cause some drift. I've helped people prototype things like finger tracking gloves, and their hand will just wander off like really fast. It's pretty entertaining to be moving your hand and just watching your virtual hand just float away. It's fun. But a lot of devices like the perception neuron, Rococo, which is the middle one, and then the Tesla suit, they all use IMUs for their basic movement tracking. And these are the Rococo and the perception neuron are somewhat affordable between 2 and 3 grand, while the Tesla suit's about 12 grand. But the Tesla suit has a lot more in it that I'll be talking about in a little while. Next is cameras. Cameras can be very useful for tracking the human body or objects in an environment. There's the most well-known ones are the cameras that things like Quest, HP, Reverb, and different headsets use to track their controllers and also track where your head is relative to the environment, which is a combination of IMU position tracking with spatial reference. Then there's OptiTrack and Vicon, which are two of the big players. OptiTrack, if you've ever watched, both of these companies were really well known in the film and animation industry for their motion capture, which they ended up bringing to VR, which pretty much needs motion capture for most of the full body stuff. Um, and so that the two pictures, the one on with the guy holding the basketball, that's Optitrack's demo from GDC 2016 or 2017. I remember seeing it. It was really cool. They were tracking the ball and you, so you could actually play virtual basketball with a real basketball and pass it to real people next to you who were also being tracked. Um, then the other image is of Vicon's recent release of a new active tracking system that they're bringing to some VR arcades pretty soon. Um, After camera, you have LiDAR systems, which I forgot to grab an image for this slide, sorry. But if you've ever used a Steam VR track system, that's pretty much a LiDAR system. It uses base stations that scan a laser in a pattern and then little detectors on the controllers and headset. Um, and it is incredibly accurate. It is pretty much the most accurate method, and it has the least chance of having any drift. Though you can, if you get a expensive OptiTrack or Vicon setup, you can get the same amount accuracy, but you're looking at costs in excess of $30,000 to $50,000 if you want that the level accuracy that something like Steam VR can do for a couple $1,000 if you want to use 4 or more base stations. Um, but then you have EMG, which this is something Meta has been talking a lot about recently, but there are other companies that have made stuff. Often they get bought out. Like the reason these devices aren't very common is because Facebook, Apple, Google all have bought, I think, at least one EMG tracking based company. I am forgetting who bought who, but they're that's why a lot of these devices aren't available anymore. I recently found that the Mindrove one was actually released and they haven't been bought up. That's the picture at the bottom. That it can track your finger movement and finger position. Kind of. It's mostly for gestures because it EMG has limited accuracy. Yeah, EMG is electromyography, which is tracking your muscle impulses using a little electrodes, similar to like EEG and that sort of stuff. Then there's devices like the Impulse neurocontroller, which is pretty much just a uh high accuracy, low latency mouse clicker. Pretty much it detects when you want to press your mouse button before you even move your finger. So it's really cool. But that's currently all it does. But if you apply that more fingers or more parts of the body, you can get a lot more accuracy in movements. So then there's avatar to human feedback. This is important because if you don't have feedback when you're moving in virtual reality, um, from the virtual environment to your real body, you can often get some different perceived sicknesses types of cyber sickness and where like if you put your arm against a wall and there's no it in VR and there's no resistance, it it can make you feel things like vertigo or different types of ghosting sensations that are quite unpleasant unless you get used to them. Um, I'll talk more about the reasoning behind some of this in a bit, but a few examples of common feedback are vibration, compression, and torques. So the most well-known one that people probably have either tried or might own is devices from B Haptics, which is the picture at the top. That's a vibration suit. It has a number of little haptic motors in it that vibrate different parts of the body when either you like get hit with a bullet in VR or someone touches you. Then there's things like tactical haptics, which I've demoed a few times, which is a torque and vibration based system that uses little weights that shift around in the controller to generate torque. And it is really, really cool when you try it. Doing something like pulling back a arrow in a bow and arrow in VR feels very realistic, and letting go, you feel the vibration from the string. Um, it's it's really cool, but they're kind of heavy and awkward at times to use. Um, and I don't know if they've fully released them yet. The type I tried is the one with the white background. Um, then there is a much higher level of accurate avatar to human feedback, and that's um, EMS, electrical muscle stimulation and resistance, which the three big companies that people are aware of right now doing this are Haptex, which has the picture in the bottom corner with the people wearing the backpacks. Then there's Tesla suit, which is they make a glove and they make the suit in the top center. That so the thing about and OO suit, which is in the top corner. So the Tesla suit and OO suit both use EMS to generate actual electrical stimulation on parts of your body, which feels like a force. Generally, if you've ever done EMS recovery stuff after either a surgery or after exercising, this is the same thing. It sometimes can feel like pain, or it can feel like it will force your body to move because it's stimulating your muscles to either contract or move, and it can actually force you to move to a certain degree. And then Haptex has a very interesting system of different tactile features, and also I think both Haptex and Tesla suit I know also has temperature zone control of the suit so it can heat up or cool down. And I'm pretty sure Haptex gloves also have a similar system. And then the Tesla suit gloves can resist movement of your fingers. So if you touch an object, it can stop you from grabbing through that object. as an example. So now we need to talk about the next level of movement, which usually has to do with trying to move around a space, because standing still in a virtual environment while your character is moving causes a lot of issues and makes a lot of people sick because of the reference frame mismatch. It's it's actually generally considered its own new type of sickness that is actually a combination of seasickness, car sickness, and vertigo. It exhibits different aspects of all three of those when you get cyber sick, and it's it can be bad if you don't know how to either prevent or mitigate or minimize the issues. And one of them is by actually physically moving in correlation with your avatar. So the most common way that people can currently do this is with omnidirectional treadmills. These are four of the more well-known ones. The catwalk C2 is the most affordable, though I think the Omni One will also be pretty affordable, while the Infinideck and the Act VR are pretty expensive because of the added complexity of the treadmill, the omnidirectional treadmill system, whereas the Omni One and the Catwalk are just using low friction shoes on a concave on a surface dish that you can walk or run on. But then if you really have a bunch of money to just throw anywhere, you can go a lot further with a lot of these systems. So first off is robotic exoskeletons on robotic arms. This is actually the type of thing people are trying to start to build, and these are expensive. The first one to really look at this in a practical sense was Axon VR's exosuit, which I don't know if they're still around. It's hard to find them. They might have changed name because Axon VR is also a different company that makes VR simulation tools for the police. I'm not going to go into any of that crap. But that exosuit was pretty well designed, but also was going to be very expensive. Then there's the Holotron, which is the one in the bottom corner. The top corner is the Axon VR exosuit. The Holotron there is actually working wall-mounted demo that one guy built for about $30,000, and it is really cool, but also needs a lot more work before it is practical. Then when it comes to motion capture and feedback suits, the Tesla suit, if you can combine the different aspects of things like the haptics gloves and Tesla suit, you get a lot of what you need for a good motion capture suit, but they need to come way down in price for it to be affordable to people. The WoW suit's actually pretty affordable for what it has. And it is the same type EMS that Tesla suit uses, just at about one like 1/20th the price. But then there are other methods of body motion capture that are incredibly accurate, that are very early in development. Which is using EIT, electrical impedance tomography, which you can see two images of. The upper image is the OpenEIT Spectra kit, which I've gotten to demo before. And then the bottom image of the guy doing the gesture, that is called the Tomo, which is, it might look similar to things like what is being developed by Meta with their reality labs, and which uses EMG, but this is actually a lot higher accuracy and a lot faster. So you can get the OpenEIT system, I think, about a few hundred hertz, which is very good for a imaging technology that's literally scanning a cross section of your body. In the bottom, you can actually see the gesture, that little heat map, that's actually the image of the cross section of his arm in real time. And then that mesh on the is a showing all the different connection layouts of the EIT impedance, and like I'd have to go really deep in DIT to explain how it works, but it's really accurate, and the more sensors you add, the more accurate it becomes, and you can easily, very quickly figure out the position of your hand with just by scanning a very small portion of your wrist. So it would allow near perfect hand tracking without anything being on your hand, which is one of the coolest technologies I can think of. But if you want to look at like theoretical designs for these robotic exoskeletons, a few shows and movies have done it before. So the two I want to mention are the Animus from the Assassin's Creed movie, which is a giant ceiling mounted robotic arm that your body gets attached to. And then the con pods in the robots from Pacific Rim. And I've been working on a design for a long time, based on some of the different designs I've seen. And in terms of the most practical and safe version, would actually be kind of a combination of both of these, to have you mounted in a gyroscope, and then mount that gyroscope to a robotic arm, because generally that would keep you safe from the robot, which I have to talk about issues for a quick second, which is accuracy is very important for this, and that's why you need so many tracking points and these motion capture suits, because right now most VR devices are only 3 points. There's your head and your controllers, which are in essence your hands, but they're blobs. They are not accurate to your fingers. So in VR, having 3 points is not very useful. A lot of people buy extra trackers and can get like up to 10 or 11 for a few $1,000s usually. And that's pretty good, but there's still a lot missing, especially gestures. If you've ever met any people who practice sign language in VR, it's really interesting because they've actually had to modify sign language to work with the current level of gestures you have in VR. So it's actually really cool. And then there's things like too much feedback, like the electrical muscle stimulation. There's Tesla suit and a few companies have found that their systems, if improperly tuned, can feel very similar to getting tased. Like they can emit a lot of force and electrical energy onto your body. So they have to be calibrated, and the companies buying them know what they're doing. Luckily. But then there's over body overextension, which I'm not going to ever show any pictures of this stuff, but if you've ever pulled a muscle from overextension, you probably know what I mean. But when you're in a robotic exoskeleton, it can go a lot worse. The only example I can think of that's kind of funny is the Iron Man 2. There's a scene that looks pretty bad, but it's pretty accurate to the dangers of body overextension. You could break bones. It's robotic exoskeleton stuff. It One of the reasons it isn't that common yet is because of how dangerous it is for that scenario. But there are very well-known ways of mitigating it, which is having hard limits for any of the robotic movements that are limited somewhat before a human's limit. So literally like a physical metal piece that will stop a robotic's leg from going backwards or overly forwards or stuff. But there are also ways of just having the motors and gears set up such that your body always it can never exert enough more force than what you feel comfortable with. So like if something like a ball hits your leg and it forces your leg back in VR, if you choose not to let your leg move, the robot would never be able to force your leg to move. It would literally strip the gear or just like declutch. A lot of these would be clutch-based systems where over a certain amount of force, it decouples the motor from the actuator or from the system. But all that stuff can be figured out. And the reason this stuff matters really is immersion and not getting things like cyber sickness. Thank you very much. I have 2 slides for showing some stuff. So I have this slide with some of my main YouTube playlist of different things in XR and stuff. I keep it somewhat up to date. And then my main links sheet for a lot of the images you saw here, a lot of the websites for these companies, references, research articles. There's about 800 or 900 links in there, and people to follow on different platforms who talk about this. And then here's an image of some of my previous talks, but I'll go to Q&A now if there's any time.
Thank you very much. Love all the QR codes. So look, what we're gonna do, and I'm gonna put these links on his, or maybe I'll make a whole page of links and QR codes that go with this talk, but we will put that on the website to make it easy for you. So Ryan, we do this thing where we have Will out in the audience with a microphone so that I can hear the speaker's question, and then I repeat the speaker's question so you can hear it.
Sounds
and then
good.
You can answer, okay? All right, great.
Sounds good.
Any questions over there?
Are there any open source, free and open source technologies that you'd want to call out in this area?
Ryan, are there any open source technologies that you want to call out in this realm?
Yeah, so I can go back. So one of them is OpenEIT. So I know a few of the developers of it and gotten tested. It's that kit at the top. So that's the open electrical impedance tomography. And you can buy their kit from OpenBCI, which is another company I definitely want to mention, which I've worked with a lot at Neurotech X. They make OpenEEG headsets. They also help other companies releasing hardware like OpenEIT release their hardware to a larger audience. Then I can't fully remember, but I think a lot of the Holotron development is open source, or it has been like shown such that people could try to build one themselves. But they haven't, I think, released a lot of the stuff, but the person who built it actually did almost receive a few overextension injuries. I'm like, I should probably not release this software yet. Like, I don't want people to accidentally break their legs. That's a very good thing not to release. Tell people understand that stuff. There's also, if you go on GitHub or all over the XR space, there are lots of open access projects for some of this stuff. I know VRChat and a few other companies have a lot of their stuff either open source, or they have very, very good tools for teaching people how to develop this stuff in Unity or Unreal. And a lot of these, pretty much all of these hardware items have Unity and Unreal packages for free that you can use to develop apps or games that allow people to use this hardware. Like, I'm pretty sure bAptics actually has a really good developer environment. And I know someone who's actually a Tesla suit developer, and there's a lot of work to make sure that people have access to the tools to develop on some of these much more expensive devices, even if they physically can't buy them yet. But also there's always more projects opening up. Sorry for the long answer.
No, that's okay. It was a good long answer. It's fine. Anyone else have a question for Ryan? Okay, where's it? Right over there, coming right up.
I'm curious, like, what XR VR experiences like Ryan enjoys like using all of these fancy technologies with, or
okay,
especially like in a couple years, what does he think?
Okay, so it's sort of a two-parter. First of all, what VR and XR experiences do you currently enjoy using? And then secondly, which ones are you looking forward to using maybe when they come out or something?
Yeah, so one that I like, it can be hit or miss depending on how you enter into it, but VR chat is pretty much the one. VR chat or alt space are pretty much the two people, if they want to have an idea of what the metaverse will be like or already is like, those are the two places to really get an idea of how people interact with each other. You can see people from all levels of owning a Quest to, I know, one of the people I know who has a Tesla suit is a VR chat user, and it's like you go from someone using a $200 headset next to you to someone who has about 20 grand of hardware on their body, and you can hear, and a lot of these people will explain exactly what they're doing and like tell you how to make sure your worlds, which it's very easy to build worlds for VR chat and alt space, can use this tech or let people who have this tech use it. Then there's a lot of VR games that are pretty immersive, but also there aren't that many AAA VR games yet. Over the past 10 years, I'd say there's about 24 games that are actually well polished, and all the other really good ones, you need a lot of mods to use. So like, some really fun ones if you've ever modded a game are Skyrim VR or Fallout 4 VR, or there's the mods for Half-Life Alyx and Boneworks. Those can be very immersive and very well developed. If it's more story-driven games, there's actually a lot that Meta have helped release that are really good. Like, recently, I think Red Matter 2 released. Those games were pretty good. There's Robo Recall, which is now very old, but was a lot of fun. There's Moss 2. There's a lot of rhythm games that are a heck of a lot of fun and are pretty addictive.
Audio Trip.
Yeah, Beat Saber is the one a lot of people know. Yeah.
Audio Trip took over for me from Beat Saber.
I'm excited for a lot of upcoming things, but I can't really recommend anything because it needs to be released to see if it even functions. Because a lot of these upcoming games, they look fantastic. They get released and they're broken. People release VR games a lot earlier than they should, very often. And if you don't have cyber legs yet, it can be very hard to go through some new games.
Yeah, and I highly recommend Dramamine. Seriously.
Yeah.
I thought that I had, VRC legs, and then I took a little while off, and then I hopped into alt space for the first time when I was used to VR chat, and I got sick all over again. Yeah. But you just take the Dramamine an hour before, and it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, so pretty much if you have methods of minimizing seasickness, car sickness, or vertigo, if you have any of those methods help a lot. Also, working your way up. Don't immediately go into VR chat and spend 2 hours in there. Work your way up from a very short amount of time. 5 minutes is usually what I recommend to start with. And like you can do it a few times a day, do 5 minutes, then work your way up to a longer period. I have a lot of experience alpha testing VR games where the amount my body moves and the world moves glitches out so heavily that most people can't even stand for a few seconds in some of these demos I've tried, and you have to be very, very used to it to handle any of those experiences. Take your time. There's no rush. This tech's getting a lot better. It's getting more affordable. Also, because you can create, your mind changes so much in VR that you can accidentally force yourself to get cyber sickness before you even go into VR. Literally, thinking about going into VR can make your mind already start to get the symptoms of cyber sickness. I've actually helped a few people restart their experience in VR by starting over, like taking 3 months off, then start from a very slow progression. Because if you go in 100% at the beginning, you will generally get sick. I have not met a single person who doesn't need to work their way up.
Yeah, definitely. And I have a rule of thumb on that, 5, 15, 45. Your brain, and it feels like, because you go in for 5 minutes and come out and you're like, that didn't even do anything. I could have been longer, I could have stayed longer or whatever, but just do 5 minutes a day for like a week, then do 15 minutes a day for a couple days at least. Then you can go in for 45. I would not recommend going in. I always start getting sick when I'm coming back. And if I don't do 5, 15, 45 over like a 2-week period, somewhere between an hour and an hour and 15 minutes, I will get sick. So that's a really good rule of thumb. And it's basically, I do that with anything new. So I'm used to one game, great. It makes me a little dizzy. I'm like, oh shit, got to do the 5, 15, 45 thing. And now I've got 2 very different games. And you're basically just, it's really like getting used to a pair of glasses or something. Like your brain has to get used to being there. And it does. You can train it, really easily. But you got to do it gradually, and it's worth it. And I'm just going to tell a little story about somebody that Ryan brought up, a friend of ours, Big Soul Jaw, who hangs out in VR chat, and he literally walks around. So he's in a Tesla suit in VR chat, and he's got his avatar has 300 cameras from top to bottom, where he's looking for objects in VR chat to add haptic metadata to the objects so it will feel like something if you happen to be wearing a Tesla suit in VR chat. And Ryan actually gave him the idea, because his system, 300 cameras going at once, slowing everything down, Ryan gave him the idea to localize, so it's with triggers. So when it comes across an object in the path of the cameras, then it sets those cameras off, and then he can do his thing and move on. And he was really excited because he was able to add metadata to even more objects. And we interviewed him for hours and hours, and it's actually going to come out in a Mindplex. It's called Mindplex magazine, that I'm an editor of, full disclosure, probably in a couple months. And my last question, unless somebody else has a question in the audience, okay, is about another thing that we're building at Singularity Net, but it doesn't require Singularity Net, is an open source. So we're all about an open source, decentralized metaverse. That's what we want to build. And we can't do it without you, because it's going to take a lot of people making a lot of cool things. And our friend Alex Peak, who has also recently been hired by Singularity Net, but who's been making things here at Aaron Swartz Day for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years now. He did a virtual museum for us in VR for Aaron Swartz. And he's making portals to go between other worlds so that you can hop between and have an outside system to keep track of your friends in all the worlds. And a chat system, because can you believe some of these systems like VR chat? It's called VR chat. You can't actually chat with people like while you're in there.
Some worlds have that functionality.
Some worlds
Not
have
many.
it, but they put it in. It doesn't come with, it's not just doesn't just come automatically, and it's really annoying too, because you're like troubleshooting, and your person's there, and you're here, and you can't hear each other for some reason, and there's no way to chat to them. It's kind of ridiculous. So what we need is a portal system that can go between worlds, with a way to remember who your friends are in the different worlds, and a chat system that works between them. And it's what we're building right now.
Yeah,
but again, there's plenty of room for everybody to contribute. It's a huge undertaking. And decentralized metaverse will be so much more fun than, and the metaverse has been around since the 70s. Thank you very much. I was a metaverse specialist in 2008. I still have my business card, and everybody here knows that. I'm sure that Facebook didn't invent anything. So it's kind of an exciting undertaking that this stuff is, finally taking off. All right, thank you, Ryan. Really appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Bye.